Madam Speaker, such are the times that this is the second of two matters dealing with this subject in this meeting. It is my duty, Madam Speaker, as Premier, to carefully frame the presentation on the Gambling Amendment Bill. Madam Speaker, this is an amendment bill which only has 13 clauses, but it might as well be 130, given the extent to which there will be interest in it. Madam Speaker, having gathered information, various data points, and carefully examined the evidence which is available, and having listened carefully to many of the concerns which have been raised by key stakeholders, including the RCIPS in their desire to address, on behalf of the people of this country, some of the issues that we've had recently in relation to increased crime, increased robberies, but not just today, Madam Speaker. It has been something that has become a bit of a feature over some period of time. Madam Speaker, the government's position is that this is a problem that we can no longer simply ignore. For too long, Madam Speaker, the approach has been to kick the can down the road, to ignore it. Madam Speaker, the result of that has been a cost to this country and to certain families in particular, because it has cost lives, Madam Speaker. There's also an increasing crime rate. There is issues around destabilization of families. There are problems around economic loss, and even, Madam Speaker, concerns around reputational damage. Madam Speaker, in presenting this bill, I will seek to demonstrate that the government is keenly aware of what is going on in our community and understands the various viewpoints. As I noted earlier, there was a lot of discussion on the previous motion, which was no doubt somewhat relevant here. There are various attitudes, perceptions towards illegal gambling, Madam Speaker, and truth be told, to some extent, there is a level of acceptance. Madam Speaker, the first thing to do when trying to resolve a problem is to recognize that the problem exists. And more importantly, Madam Speaker, to demonstrate to our citizens who are watching and who are listening that we understand this, that we intend to address the matter. Madam Speaker, I will outline how we propose to tackle the problem by providing an overview of the proposed amendments by virtue of the Gambling Bill, or the amendments to the Gambling Act, which are set out in this Gambling Bill that I'm moving the second reading of. Madam Speaker, I have no illusions about the issues I have no illusions about the challenges of taking this on. But what I do know, Madam Speaker, is that people have given us their mandate to be their voice, to serve them, and above all, to ensure that the rule of law is upheld and society is made as safe as it can be. And I would say, Madam Speaker, may it always be at the front of our minds that it is the constitutional duty of every member of this Honourable Parliament to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of these our wonderful Cayman Islands. So, Madam Speaker, I wish to reiterate that illegal gambling is a problem, and I will say that it is a problem that the 19 elected members of this House of Parliament can no longer ignore. To do so, Madam Speaker, in my view, would mean we are not upholding our constitutional duty. Madam Speaker, we do have, as we all know, a very diverse community. There are many customs, practices, cultures, traditions, perhaps some idiosyncrasies. But it goes without saying, Madam Speaker, that as human beings, we are always involved in various forms of social interactions, entertainment, and commercial activity. I say that, Madam Speaker, I give that broad overview because I don't believe that we have the option of burying our heads in the beautiful white sands of 7 Mile Beach. There's no need for shock and awe at the existence of this social issue. We all know that it exists. It is not something that's new, not something that's just emerged. Madam Speaker, what we are doing with this, proposing to do with this bill, is to amend the Gambling Act, which was first enacted on the 1st of January 1964. It's a law, Madam Speaker, that is older than I am, and I don't think I'm that old, and I'm not going to, thankfully, rely on the maths of one of my colleagues earlier that thought that that was somewhere in the region of 80 years, but certainly it's close to 59 years. Madam Speaker, when I speak of illegal gambling, I'm speaking of many forms of gambling, but more often than not, I'm speaking of gambling in the form of the illegal lotteries, or what is more commonly described as the numbers, racket, industry, business, whatever you want to call it. But it also includes, in a broader sense in terms of gambling, betting on various sports, betting on dominoes, betting on cards and dice games, and also online gambling, Madam Speaker. So these are, the activities are broad, and we are under no illusions about their existence. And Madam Speaker, I don't stand here from any judgmental perspective. I don't gamble. I do not find any entertainment in it. In the same way that I don't smoke and I don't drink. But that, Madam Speaker, is neither here nor there in my ability to appreciate that there are people who do those things. There are people who find some entertainment value. And I would say there are others who actually believe that there is some positive value in terms of earning an income. I don't see that to be the case, Madam Speaker. If that was the honest truth, we wouldn't have illegal gambling. We wouldn't have lotteries. We wouldn't have numbers, because the house would be broke. So we have challenges, Madam Speaker, in addressing this particular issue. And it is something that is part of everyday life here, it seems. We have people who don't buy numbers here, or gamble here, but who will, either on their first landing in the US or whenever a family member is going up, they'll get a whole ream of numbers for them to buy on lotteries, or Powerball, or Florida Lotto, or one of them. So it is, Madam Speaker, a broad issue. It's got its own little quirks. You know, we have people who really get into this. They have the study of dreams and birth dates and ages and death dates and events and formulas and calculations. And Madam Speaker, there's oftentimes even the almost ubiquitous question of one number played. It's even alleged, Madam Speaker, that it has been overheard being whispered amongst parishioners at the end of a church service. So, Madam Speaker, it's something that's widespread, commonplace, broadly practiced. Yet, Madam Speaker, for the better part of 59 years, it has been a criminal activity, has been against the law. There was an amendment done in 2015, Madam Speaker, to the law, which coincidentally was an amendment brought by myself when I was Minister for Financial Services, Commerce and the Environment in the 13 to 17 administration. And that amendment was done initially to allow cruise vessels to be registered here and to operate casinos on board. And we took the opportunity at that time to amend the law also to deal with the local voluntary organizations, churches, and service clubs who were fundraising, holding lawful raffles for fundraising purposes, public good, Madam Speaker. Lawful after that. Made it lawful. So, Madam Speaker, it is widespread. It is an issue that I feel as a government we cannot ignore, and my colleagues support me in that position. It is a problem that must be addressed. Madam Speaker, before we move on, let me just talk about what exactly is the problem then. There is this notion, Madam Speaker, that this is a victimless crime. This is something that doesn't hurt anybody else. Madam Speaker, we don't have, at this point, the mandate to change the law. We don't have the mandate to legalize anything. But we're also in a position where we cannot consider ourselves a healthy democracy if the rule of law is being openly ignored and defied. And to take the position that it's a victimless crime and we should ignore it is a fallacy, absolute fallacy. Madam Speaker, this viewing gambling as a victimless crime shrouds the insidious nature of the crime itself. And I don't intend, Madam Speaker, to sugarcoat the reality as to what exists on the ground. I'm not going to get into any Donald Rumsfeld-like challenge of describing things that we know we don't know and things that we don't know about illegal gambling. But we are certainly still able to piece together a very clear picture of the scale of the problem in the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, I've also benefited from discussions with both His Excellency the Governor as well as the Commissioner of Police, who have responsibility for national security and safety of the people of this country. And together with my own views, research, knowledge, I am convinced that we are not dealing with a small, unsophisticated, friendly neighborhood game of bingo. This is, Madam Speaker, about participants in illegal gambling being directly facilitated by and supported by organized crime, which benefits international syndicates, Madam Speaker. So we can easily list amongst the criminal activities associated with our local gambling syndicates illegal commercial activity, cross-border money laundering, and potential tax evasion in the countries where the proceeds are being remitted, as well as a host of other financial crimes. There's also the strong suspicion that work permits are being sought, Madam Speaker, for job holders whose only role and real source of income comes from selling numbers. So we have people that we're giving work permits to in good faith to, on the face of it, conduct work to generate income for themselves, for what is otherwise viewed as a legitimate operation, when in fact there's nothing legitimate about it. They are simply selling numbers. They don't have any other legitimate employment role. Madam Speaker, the culture of illegal gambling in our country has become shockingly acceptable. And I know I'm going to sound very intolerant, and to an extent I am, a large extent I am, because the consequences which I will get onto. That's not to say, Madam Speaker, that as has been discussed earlier on the motion, that we can't control and regulate an aspect of this business while at the same time making those elements of the business that are not authorized, that are not regulated, that are not supervised, illegal and subject to punishment for conducting their operations illegally. Madam Speaker, illegal numbers games and racehorse betting, for example, are largely controlled by these on-island criminal gangs with international connections. And that raises, as I said, national security issues. It raises issues around, or concerns around our safety and our integrity as a country, but perhaps even broader than that, Madam Speaker. Some of these things involve cruelty to animals, for example. We have cockfighting rings that are being conducted. It's barbaric. It's un-Caymanian. You would never regard that as being an appropriate spectator sport, but it is a heavily bet-on activity. So, Madam Speaker, to demonstrate the interconnectivity between the criminal activity, on one occasion, I recall a report that a canoe from Jamaica had been intercepted, which had on board, in addition to marijuana, a number of roosters being illegally imported for the purpose of cockfighting. Madam Speaker, it goes further than that because it also involves illegal dogfighting. And we have had many reports in the press, probably in the past year and a half, 2 years probably, of operations in which these sorts of activities have been identified and have been addressed by the police service. Madam Speaker, these poor animals live miserable lives, are often abused, maimed, killed, and most of the time, after going through their service, they end up having to be euthanized. Madam Speaker, we cannot aspire to be, we don't want that for Cayman. We must bear no resemblance to that. So these are issues that are even tangential, but they're important issues, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let's get to the point of the issue. Let's get to the heart of the issue. We have a piece of legislation which probably decades ago now has ceased to be fit for purpose. The inadequacy of the penalties for illegal gambling or related crimes have fueled an unsettling amount of serious violent offenses in the Cayman Islands. In 2021, there was a concern increasing in the number of offenses involving firearms, such as armed robberies and gang-related shootings. As we reflected 1 year later on, in this year, 2022, illegal gambling continues in all of its forms to have an unwelcome, pervasive influence on the most vulnerable in our communities. Madam Speaker, the series of robberies have heavily contributed to this increase in crime. Many of the businesses that have been targeted are small businesses and individuals who are involved in the numbers games, the illegal gambling. Madam Speaker, it bears also pointing out that this high level of illegal gambling activity also comes at a time when much of the world, including our islands, are beset or is beset by inflation. The cost of living has been rising in this post-lockdown period of geopolitical instability, and the unconscionable war launched upon the Ukraine by Russia. Too many of our people, Madam Speaker, may feel that gambling is a part of the solution, that it is a way to make ends meet, a way to survive, a way perhaps even to prosper, might be their view, or hopefully prosper. But Madam Speaker, that's a cruel trick of the mind. The vast majority are worse off, not better off, and believing that tomorrow will bring better luck and a payout is another cruel hoax. Not a solution for these difficult times, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, government has to fight too hard to enable our people to take one step forward, to then sit back just to watch them slip 2 steps backwards because of illegal gambling. Madam Speaker, the government shares in the concerns those concerns expressed by RCIPS, that we must work to discourage illegal gambling in our communities and its related consequences. We must address the cross-border threat. We must address the serious crimes. We have to address the open violation of the law, Madam Speaker. We cannot just simply leave things alone, leave things as they are. And we certainly can't allow criminals from overseas, Madam Speaker, to deal with gambling-related conflicts in our beautiful country, nor turn a blind eye to the movement of illicit cash out of the country. So, Madam Speaker, as I said earlier, far from being a victimless crime, illegal gambling is part of an organized crime, often directed from outside these islands, from overseas. Illegal gambling has resulted in violent crimes and murder. Madam Speaker, colleagues in an earlier debate referenced the fact that we all feel for those families that have been impacted. But Madam Speaker, we have to do more than that. We have to do what our Constitution calls us to do. We have to do what our conscience calls us to do. We have to find a solution to addressing these risks of our people being victims of violent crime. We can't just accept that they should be robbed, assaulted, bullied, extorted, or, Madam Speaker, indeed, murdered. Now, I don't care whether they have been committing any offenses. I don't care whether they're selling numbers. They don't deserve to die. They don't deserve to be robbed at gunpoint. They don't deserve to be hit over the head, pistol whipped, shot deliberately or accidentally. They don't deserve any of that, Madam Speaker. So it's our responsibility to address these issues. Madam Speaker, these tragedies which are occurring here, in some cases may not appear to be gambling related, but on further review, it is quite clear that much of it is. Anytime you have illegal activity which involves significant amounts of money and is unregulated, you have this risk. And Madam Speaker, young people in this country, senior citizens, small business owners are bearing the brunt of a social problem that has been ignored for years. The negative impacts are becoming more and more obvious. The cost to society is becoming more obvious. The harms are becoming more obvious. And in fact, Madam Speaker, many people would regard it as being heavily underestimated. Madam Speaker, this is not happening to people on the fringe, people who are in a different town, people who are in the outskirts of our society. This is happening across our society to people who are a part of everyday life. And the concern about that, Madam Speaker, is that at some point, we may have another person. We may have a 5-year-old or 6-year-old walking on the other side of the street with her mother, with her father, and a stray bullet emanating from this activity, emanating from this violence, kills that child, Madam Speaker. That is not a cost that we want to bear. We cannot afford to bear, Madam Speaker, because we have no explanation, we have no justification for allowing the circumstances which could give rise to that happening. Madam Speaker, there's crime that happens. Bad things happen to good people. Let me put it that way, at times. But oftentimes these are accidental things. But when we know that there is activity which is creating the kind of environment, the kind of opportunity for bad things to happen to good people, let us try to do something about it. Madam Speaker, let me touch on the social cost. Before that, let me talk about the reputational risk. Madam Speaker, we know that the proceeds of this illicit money, a lot of it can't be banked here. A lot of it is leaving the country in a variety of ways. And it is creating a risk for us. We have this amazing financial services industry that serves the world, that we are trying to ensure is protected from abuse by any bad actors from any part of the world, Madam Speaker. But when we know that this sort of thing is happening and the money is leaving our country through a variety of ways, matriculating through some systems, Madam Speaker, it's a threat to our reputation. It has a danger of giving us a label of hypocrites. So I say that only to say, Madam Speaker, that if we know this is happening, we need to do something about it. we need to try to address these issues. Madam Speaker, the cost on families, costs on businesses are heart-wrenching. The cost on wider society is heart-wrenching. There are people who are involved in gambling who have the physical symptoms of having addiction. They have depression, they have anxiety, some end up with stress-related illnesses. So, Madam Speaker, there is a significant cost to the country. It is eroding confidence, Madam Speaker. We must face that uncomfortable truth and deal with it. We say we want to hear the views of the people of the country, Madam Speaker, as to whether we should provide a legal alternative through which they can participate, whether it's for whatever reason, entertainment or otherwise, and ensure that the rest of the activity is addressed with appropriate controls, appropriate levels of deterrent, sentences, fines. We must face that truth, Madam Speaker. We must deal with that. We cannot turn a blind eye any longer. No matter how much it is accepted by a lot of our people. Madam Speaker, I don't know why it has taken this long to address this issue. We seem to have kicked the can down the road, as I said, for a long time. The law as it is incapable of serving any purpose of ensuring that this activity is controlled. And it cannot be said, Madam Speaker, that others didn't have the opportunity to deal with it. We know as recently as 2018 there was a bill, the Gambling Amendment Bill 2018, which was brought to Parliament, never debated, never put on the order paper, and the reason remains a mystery. I've even asked members of the opposition, who were the government at the time, what happened, why it wasn't dealt with, and the response I got was a shrug and I don't really know. Madam Speaker, I think that this is not something that we can continue to do. We have to resolve this issue. Madam Speaker, Tolstoy wrote in War and Peace that writing laws is easy, but governing is difficult. A society that chooses not to govern by ignoring its own laws is taking the easy road to perdition. Our people should have the confidence to know that laws in the country will be enforced, especially when illegal activity results in a myriad of problems, societal impacts, safety, national security issues. Madam Speaker, we, as I said, are happy to let the public decide whether we continue, whether we enforce fully the Gambling Act as it is, with these proposed amendments to address the negative issues, the negative aspects, the societal ills, the safety issues on its own, or whether we provide an outlet, an option, an alternative that's legal, that's regulated, that's supervised, but ensure that everything else is addressed, that all other illegal activities are stopped. So, Madam Speaker, the Gambling Amendment Bill 2022 proposes to increase penalties for a number of gambling-related offenses, including the use and ownership of premises for gambling, the publication of lottery numbers, and dealing with money resulting from gambling activities. While there are significant fines being proposed through the bill, which will likely have an improved deterrent effect, given the estimated sums of money being generated by gambling in Cayman, the government is also taking an additional step of approving an amendment order to Schedule 1 of the Proceeds of Crime Act 2020 revision. And that order, Madam Speaker, would seek to add specific gambling offenses from the Gambling Act under the list of lifestyle offenses so that confiscation orders can be made by the courts. The fine for offenses under Section 4 of the previous Gambling Amendment Bill Let me move on to another element, Madam Speaker, because I think I have an error in my notes in relation to the specifics of the bill. Under the new bill, and in an effort to strengthen sanctions and fulfill government's dedication to increased enforcement and improved legislation, penalties have also been increased as follows. The penalty for owning, occupying, or permitting another person to use a place as a common gaming house, managing or assisting in the management of a place being used as a common gaming house, or assisting in carrying on a public lottery, receiving directly or indirectly money for a public lottery, or selling, offering for sale, giving or delivering any lottery tickets, drawing, throwing, declaring the winner or winning number or ticket, writing, printing, publishing, or causing to be written, printed, or published any lottery ticket, list of prizes or result of a public lottery, announcing or publishing or causing it to be announced or published that any place is a common gaming house with the purpose of inviting or soliciting persons to breach the provisions of the Act, providing funding to establishing or to conduct the business of a common gaming house or a public lottery, or committing an act of unlawful gaming would increase, all of those activities, Madam Speaker, under the bill, would increase, pardon me, all of those activities would increase, Madam Speaker, from a fine of $400 up to $400 to a fine of up to $10,000, a term of imprisonment from 1 year to 4 years, up to 4 years, or to both. And I stress, Madam Speaker, even though the bill will say that it is $10,000 for the fine, 4 years possible incarceration, or both, those are not absolute numbers. Those are, that's the maximum range. So the penalty might be considerably less. Might be less than $1,000, for example. Might be less than $500. And it would only be in the probably more extreme situations where there is a custodial sentence. And that would certainly likely start at a very lower level, period of months. And it would only be in the most extreme, perhaps the most egregious sort of cases where it would be anywhere near the maximum levels. Madam Speaker, the penalty for playing in or being found in a common gaming house, taking part in a public lottery, being found gambling or betting in licensed premises, or for failure to prove that a person was not in possession of a lottery ticket would be up to $2,500. Again, I'm putting the words up to in there. It doesn't say it up to, it just has the number 2,500. We know that that is just a drafting style. It means up to. In relation to that, there is the potential for up to 6 months imprisonment. Further, Madam Speaker, the penalty for using a place for gambling without permission is up to $5,000 or 1 year imprisonment, or both. The penalty for committing any gambling activity involving selling tickets or paying out for lottery tickets would be up to $5,000 or up to 1 year imprisonment, or both. The penalty for attending or assembling in any public or private place for the purpose of ascertaining or waiting for lottery results would be up to $2,500 or up to 6 months imprisonment, or both. The penalty for refusing to demolish a place erected or constructed for gambling where so ordered by a judge would also be up to $5,000 and up to 1 year imprisonment, and up to $100 a day fine for each day that there is non-compliance with the court order. Madam Speaker, a further element is the penalty for keeping a common gaming house or for conducting or taking part in a lottery. This would be the operations, the heart of the operations. This would be for people that are running the illegal gambling operations. And this would be up to $20,000 and up to 4 years imprisonment, or both. Madam Speaker, the other aspect of the bill is that it seeks to clarify the mode for the mode of trial for offenses under the Act. The current Act talks about offenses being tried summarily in grand court, which appears contradictory. This bill is designed to ensure that there is clarity that the vast majority of the offenses would be triable summarily, but offenses under Section 4, Section 20, and Section 21 of the bill as they're amended by, of the Act as they're amended by this bill would be considered Category B offenses, which are triable either way in accordance with Section 5 of the Criminal Procedure Code. And that means, Madam Speaker, that the defendant would have the choice of whether it is a jury trial or whether it is a trial by judge alone. Madam Speaker, in order to disincentivize illegal gambling and reduce profits to those criminal organizations, particularly those overseas that are taking money out of our people's pockets here, we also need to educate the public on the reality of this and the unsustainable nature of these sorts of activities. Madam Speaker, under the POC, the Proceeds of Crime Act, there are two regimes for confiscation of assets. One is proceeds of criminal conduct, in which any confiscation can only amount to the benefit from that particular offense, charged, and criminal lifestyle. It is the criminal lifestyle regime that any criminal should be concerned about, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the course of criminal activity is proved if the defendant is convicted in court of 3 or more offenses from which the defendant has benefited, or has been convicted of 2 offenses from which the defendant has benefited. On this occasion, and within 6 years of the start of the most recent proceedings, they've been convicted on at least 2 separate occasions of an offense from which the defendant has benefited. The benefit to the defendant needs to be at least $5,000, so there is a bar that has to be achieved in order for this lifestyle, criminal lifestyle test to be achieved, which would bring about the operations of the Proceeds of Crime Act. Madam Speaker, the order has added the following gambling offenses to the list of lifestyle offenses, or proposes to add that. It's Section 4A, B, C, D, and H offenses, Section 10 and Section 20. Section 10 being using a place for gambling without permission, Section 20 being the penalty for keeping the common gaming houses. And as I indicated earlier, that is one of the serious offenses. In addition, Section 21, which is a penalty for conducting or taking part in a lottery, as well as Section 22(1)A and C offenses, are included in terms of this list of lifestyle offenses. Madam Speaker, by passing the bill, we will be sending the strongest possible signal of our commitment to supporting law enforcement, to providing them with the tools and putting them in a stronger position, putting the authorities in a stronger position to more effectively combat illegal gambling and the ills, the issues that arise, the negative issues that arise from that in our community. And it will prioritize, Madam Speaker, the safety of the Cayman Islands community. As a government, Madam Speaker, we have a duty to maintain law and order in our country and to work tirelessly to protect our people's welfare and security. I think we take that duty seriously, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I wrap up my introduction to this bill, I think it is appropriate to state that government views this legislation, this reform, as necessary and urgently needed. But we are also taking the step of getting the views of the people on how to address this issue more broadly. Do we leave it as it is, give it the strength that it needs to make it fully enforced, to protect our people without any alternative approach, or do we provide an alternative approach at the same time as we protect others from those activities that would be illegal? Madam Speaker, we all know the expression, the surest way for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. Good men and women, pardon me, to do nothing. We've accepted that we must do something, Madam Speaker, and we've set out what we think is a fair approach to get the views of the people on how we go forward. Madam Speaker, we will not be added to the history books to just be another group of politicians who choose comfort and political expediency over countering a complex and cross-border criminal activity that has real impacts on our people, economically, in terms of safety, and in terms of their lives, Madam Speaker. So, rather than just a wink and a nod and a false sense of security, it's our duty to talk to our people about these issues. It's our duty to ensure that our democracy, our safety, their safety, our borders, our reputation, which is under threat internally and externally, are protected. We have a problem, and the first step in making real change to address the problem is recognizing it and addressing it. We feel the way we have proposed to do this, Madam Speaker, is a fair way. Nobody wants to see people being unfairly treated. Nobody wants to see people losing their lives. Nobody wants to see people losing their livelihoods. But Madam Speaker, we have to be united in solutions, and we have to be strengthening this enforcement regime at the same time that we talk about talking to our people as to what kind of alternative approach they would like us to take on their behalf. Madam Speaker, every day I get comments from constituents, particularly when there has been a spate of robberies, a spate of assaults, any kind of significant criminal activity. They're always asking me to do something about the issues, to get the police to do something about it. Madam Speaker, we have to give them the tools, and we have to devise the solutions that help to produce the better results. We have to trust in the judicial system. We have to have the whole system working, Madam Speaker. We, all of us in here, as good men and women, must do what we need to when faced with harmful wrongdoing. We must take a stand. Madam Speaker, we intend to move forward as quickly as possible with the proposed referendum on the issue of a national lottery as a part of this bill. Madam Speaker, I hope to have a clearer indication of timing before I get back to winding up on this, and to be able to give a better indication of timing on commencement of this. But Madam Speaker, I want all of us to accept that we have to do something. We can't just allow the status quo to remain. I want to thank the police, Portfolio of Legal Affairs, Cabinet Office, all of those individuals, some known, some unknown, for their assistance and support in helping to bring this important legislative amendment forward. Madam Speaker, with that, I commend the Gambling Amendment Bill 2022 for the favorable consideration of this Honourable Parliament.
The Honourable Member for West Bay West.
Madam Speaker, I understand the government's desire to bring this bill as in regards to crimes committed. And having had the debate on the referendum, I doubt I will get support on the amendment I propose and is now circulated. For a long time I've been by myself in that chair. By myself. So, Madam Speaker, I still have my views on this matter. And in saying I understand the various things that the Premier has pointed out, about the crimes, in saying I understand that, I am concerned about the implication of fines to houses, and that is something that I hope that we can address. That can be explained further at the end or certainly in committee stage. I don't believe that increasing fines is going to stop the urge for people to buy numbers. yes, we have to increase the fines because some of them are ridiculous. But about it's stopping this illegal numbers game, that's a pie in the sky dream. It's a dream. And if they are successful, you can believe would be a lot of people lose their house or in Northwood. Madam Speaker, the lottery and the number games are two different things, completely two different things. And I believe that the legal department could point that out to them. Just the amount of illegal numbers that are being done now in Cayman, from what I understand, and I think it was the member for Georgetown North who read out a list from just one area and one country. Remember, we have 2 or 3 countries that are involved, people are involved in purchasing these numbers. The lottery, as is proposed, that we are talking about for a referendum, as a lottery system, is completely different from the number games. The way, if this House is serious about stopping criminality, the way to stop the illegal numbers game is to make it legal. Oh, the amendment will be moved. I am not withdrawing the amendment because I feel strong about it. Madam Speaker, I think it's time this House could make a decision as to the numbers game being legal. As I said, I know now about what the referendum is intended to do. And so I have given notice of an amendment to make it legal and for any proceeds to be used for education, for the elderly, stipends that we give them monthly and raise that to the level it needs to be raised, and housing, something that we all know is needed, and policies are being announced about these different things. You got to have money to do them. We can set up a lottery, but the experiences from what I understand in other island countries who had a problem with the numbers and set up the lottery system, the number games went on. There were no change because government set up a lottery. That's the experience in some of the island countries that I know about. And I'm thinking a similar situation, a similar thing could happen here. I don't have all details, and the Premier did a good job of outlining the various problems that surround this issue. But you can't wait to the referendum for that, you know. You continuing on Eastern Avenue, continuing all over this country. And the fact is that Caymanians are purchasing these numbers, and Caymanians don't say they're not veteran, from what I understand. I was the speaker, but my ear was to the ground. I was involved in my surroundings and listening and looking and understanding what's going on in the country. People pay off their loan, from what I understand. And people buy numbers to rely weekly on an income to pay and buy food and pay bills with. That is happening in this country. That's happening in this country. And I'm not here blaming any government. It is a situation that exists. So I say, let's make the number games legal. That's why I say set up a system where the illegal numbers is legally paying funds to our government instead of millions of dollars, because that's what it is now, going into other countries to build up their economy. At least our government will get some revenue from that, for, as I said, for education, for housing, and elderly needs, including their insurance that we need to ensure is up to the level where it can take care of elderly people. These are big bills. There's no denying. These are big bills for this country to be grasping with. We know we need education buildings. I need a high school in West Bay the worst kind of way. And you could put another one in Borden Town. And I would think that Cayman Brac must be in need of something now too. And you want an airport? We want and we should have the jetways. Think of all the things that we are saying, 100 houses? How much can we go into debt for these things? We have to find revenue streams. I'll talk about that more on my other motion. But I believe that the number games allows us to get some funding that will help in those areas in education. It might not build a high school, I don't know. I don't know the full extent of it. But you can believe that it would help probably with the feeding program. And it will help, as I said, in housing. Might not build 100 houses, not over immediately, but for other times. And it will take this risk of Caymanians with their fines and everything else that is now being increased because of the crimes that exist. Don't say we don't know, we know. Premier said so. The crimes exist. And in those areas, and we need not say anything else but that we need to make it legal. I'm not telling government how to do it. That's for government, whether they find a consultancy or whatever, to do this, but do it quickly and get that out of the way. They go into a referendum. If they want to introduce a proper or another kind of lottery system, then so be it, if the people say yes. But we can't wait on this for any referendum. This is happening. And increasing the fines, it's going to continue. If there is social fallout because it will continue. If there is social deterioration because of it, it will continue. And so, Madam Speaker, I don't think I need to belabor the point. The Premier took a long time to tell us the crimes around it, but we don't need Premier or anybody else to tell us that we should do something now about it. This House needs to do something, and it's been a debate, and people have been asking about it for years. Why don't government do something? And some of us said, oh, no, we're not going to do this now, and we can't do this now, and the church and this next thing. And yes, all those things we have to consider and take the blows to do the good. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Red Bay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If I could have the benefit of the lectern. better assign a responsibility to the younger man these days. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm a real fan of Alice in Wonderland. And especially of the Cheshire Cat. Would you tell me, please, said the cat, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to. I don't much care where. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat, so long as I get somewhere, Alice added as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if you only walk long enough. Madam Speaker, the government's presentation on this whole issue of gambling, I can only describe as high and foremost, or to put it more delicately, the putting of the cart before the horse. We had, starting this morning, a long exposition by the Honorable Premier about the importance and the need and all of the democratic virtues of holding a referendum to determine whether or not the country is in favor of a national lottery and of decriminalizing consumption and possession of small quantities of marijuana or cannabis. And after considerable debate, the House voted in favor. The only abstention was mine, and that was because, not because I didn't support in principle what was being proposed, but because I believe that the disregard for precision in the formulation of the question is bound to create problems down the road. But the concept of a referendum on these issues is something that I am fully supportive of. And having done that, the Premier then proceeds to present a gambling amendment bill. The purpose, the stated purpose of which is to shut down the operation of the numbers game in Cayman, because gambling is such an inherently dangerous and unlawful activity. Now, the Premier did say, Madam Speaker, that the bill, that the act, the Gambling Act, is older than him, and that it has remained virtually unchanged all these years. The only changes that have occurred were those which he brought when he was a minister in the administration, which I had the honor and privilege to lead. And they weren't brought at his initiative either. It was others of us who understood that the Red Cross and the Lions Clubs and Rotary Clubs and all of these other important service organizations were operating unlawfully under the provisions of the Gambling Act ever since. So we took the opportunity when the concern was about the cruise ships being able to operate their casinos within territorial waters to fix that matter. Madam Speaker, for at least 40 years, there has been the buying and selling of numbers in Cayman. At least 40 years. How, at the same point that the government decides that it is going to hold a national referendum on whether we should have a national lottery, that the government then decides that in advance of that, they want to put as many Caymanians as they possibly can in jail to keep them from buying and selling numbers. The logic of that eludes me, Madam Speaker. We have survived this long with the law imperfect as it is, but on the eve of us deciding whether or not the country wants a national lottery, we decide to increase the penalties to a point where we effectively, or we hope, I think that is being very optimistic, to shut down the numbers business in Cayman. The Premier purports to say he understands that this is a major social issue, that this has become part of the norm and part of the local culture. But I'm not sure he really truly understands how endemic, for lack of a better word, this is. You can buy numbers at least 6 times a day for lotteries that play at least 6 times a day in Cayman. And so the scapegoat, we say, is, oh, it's increased crime, and it resulted in robberies, and even in one unfortunate individual losing his life because he was present in a place that is known to sell numbers at the wrong time. Madam Speaker, without question, number sellers get robbed. But hear this news flash, so do gas stations, subway shops, restaurants, stores, gas stations. I lost track after 25. There had been at least 25 robberies since September that have been reported. Friday evening, gone 2 weeks, I was sitting in an establishment in central Georgetown, talking with friends and sipping a Macallan. Thank you for saying so. And suddenly there was this commotion, people by the door. Said the little store next door just got robbed. This is in the center of Georgetown, in a plaza, with businesses and people walking all over in broad daylight, 5:30, 5:45. 2 men walk in with guns and rob the grocery store, the little grocery store that is there. You're not selling no numbers. My issue, Madam Speaker, is that it is wrong for us to use these sorts of hyperbole trying to get through changes which are being pushed from certain quarters. Madam Speaker, I think you know, although I don't know you that well, but I know where you come from. You understand that the majority of people who buy a number is Caymanian. They are basically, we got Caymanians, no, Caymanians number one. You got Jamaicans, you got Latinos. Those are the 3 principal nationalities that buy numbers. And it's not only big rich people that buy in the numbers either, by and large. It is ordinary people. All of us who move around will understand this. I was 61 on the 6th of September this year, which meant I was born in 1961. You know how many people bought numbers in various versions of that? Premier, when you say about this, I got to turn it around. I got to turn it around. That's how the people operate. You know how many old people, senior citizens, buy a little number. Boy, you know, I like number 14 today, you know. Man, I've been looking at that. We gonna put these people in jail? You tell me which police officer is gonna be brave enough to go arrest the little old lady from down in Miles Road or Rock Hole and bring her and her wheelchair to the summer court. This is what we're dealing with. This is reality. I know, Madam Speaker, that a few on that side over there may live in ivory towers, but most of them are ordinary people like me. They move around. They know who's who and what our people do. And whatever else people will ever accuse me of, they never accuse me of not understanding what's happening in my country and on the ground amongst my people, because that's where I have always been most comfortable. And I don't know if they got their ears to the ground, but I didn't even have to put mine to the ground. Everywhere I go, I am being assailed. What are they trying to do? What is the government trying to do to us now? Do you think we're under enough pressure already? They're going to take this little thing away from us too? Madam Speaker, in case they think I am being dramatic, have they looked at what the amendments propose? There's one special one here. That proposes to send, yeah, here it is. That's the one. Penalty for conducting or taking part in a lottery. The Principal Act is amended in Section 21 as follows. This is, Madam Chair, forgive me, this is Clause 10 of the bill. The Principal Act is amended in Section 21 as follows. A, by deleting the words commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine of $100 and a default of payment to imprisonment for 3 months with or without hard labor. So we're deleting that and we're substituting for it the words commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine of $20,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 4 years or to both. For buying a number? Seriously, Madam Speaker? We could send our people to jail for 4 years. 4 years? Let me get it right. Yes. And a fine of $20,000 or both? Seriously? The government that gets up and the premier who gets up every opportunity, we are the government for the people and of the people? Like I said, they better speed up the rebuilding and renovation of not just the prison at Northwood, but the one Fairbanks too, because plenty of women involved in this. Plenty of women by numbers. I'm not asking anybody to move around amongst them all the time. Mr. Allen, what number you think we should play today? Happens to me all the time. What number you like for today? Madam Speaker, what is the government trying to achieve? The member from West Bay West is absolutely dead right, because as I said about all the time, whatever you say about him, don't think that he don't understand what the ordinary person in this country feels and thinks. You think this is going to stop numbers being bought and sold? But it's going to provide the motivation of, of the police to now go and arrest the easy targets, the little man, the little woman who go buy two little numbers. They're going to be the first ones. The sellers, how many sellers they ever convicted? They had one big high profile case that went on for years, acquitted. It is the little person, and I don't mean dwarfs, I mean person of little means, that always suffer the most from these sorts of things. And the other point that the member from West Bay has made, which is dead right, is putting in place a national lottery is not going to come even close to replacing the numbers game. When you can buy numbers that play every day, and there's a member from Madam Speaker, I just need to point out one thing to the member from West Bay West about his motion, which says that numbers game means a gambling game in which the player of the game picks one number to match the number that will be randomly drawn the following day. No, they play not only the following day, sometimes multiple times in one day. But people have multiple chances and they win. Many people win. Most people that I come across don't win large sums of money, but they get a few $100s here and a few $100s there. And you can always tell when they win, because when they come through the door, they got a smile on their face, boy. Madam Speaker, the government needs to decide what position it takes. As I said, they say that the principal motivation is the illegal activity and violent crime that this also engenders. And I am not going to try to say, as I said before, of course, the sellers are easier targets because it's more difficult for them to make a report. But this is the same government that in the same breath and in the same motion is proposing the decriminalization of marijuana, small quantities of cannabis. There is no legal means aside from medical purposes, which are very carefully circumscribed. There is no legal means to bring marijuana to Cayman. Does the government understand the import of what I've just said? They are about to ask the country whether or not they support the decriminalization of small quantities of marijuana. Marijuana, which by its very presence in Cayman is illegal, because it could not have gotten here lawfully. You think that came in small little quantities? It came in bales. What do you think was alongside it on the canoes when they were coming down? It wasn't slingshots. I don't think it was slingshots. So, you know, the government has really got to stop being so schizophrenic about these things. You got to decide where you stand on these issues. You can't have it both ways. Madam Speaker, the proposal, I'm not supposed to talk about that. I'll leave that till the member from West Bay West moves his motion. But the approach that the member is proposing is really something that the government should look carefully at. Find a way to regulate the numbers game. I'm not saying that can stop all the illegal activity either, but at least you have a better chance, because if I want to buy a number and I know I can buy it legally from the Minister for Sport, I am not going to buy it from down so-and-so. It will go a long way. The lottery is something I will support, but that is not going to be a substitute for most people for their daily numbers fix. Sometimes more than once a day they buy. I win this morning, 10 o'clock, I win midday too. So, Madam Speaker, this is so deeply ingrained in the psyche of local residents and Caymanians that this is just going to result in many tears. We were worrying, where he is, he's not here now, but the Minister for Tourism, very, very concerned, as I think most of us are, about our young people winding up with police records because they were caught with ganja. But we're not worried about older people, because mostly older people that I know that buy this, I don't know too many young people that do it, but I'm sure some of them must do it too. But the ones that I know are mostly older people. Many of them retired. I'm struggling to keep the lights on. We're not worried about putting them in jail, finding them sums that they cannot possibly ever pay. So that means they could go to jail for longer to deal with that. And then they got criminal record too. Somebody's grandmother, grandfather, my auntie. Madam Speaker, that's what we're talking about. Why are we troubling this now? We know there is an issue. Let's try to work through the issue. Let's take the kind of approach the member from West Bay West is proposing. Let's look at that and see how that can possibly be tweaked or revised, whatever, to work, to create a system by which this can be regulated without this draconian approach of sending masses of Caymanians to jail because they bought a number. I want members, Madam Speaker, to look deep within their own being, think about the circumstances of the people they represent, and not buy into all of this hyperbole about, you think when we pass this tonight, that all of a sudden the robbery's gonna stop? Madam Speaker, this bill, with very few changes, was foisted upon me as Premier to bring down here in 2018. It was gazetted. I asked the learned Attorney General when he stands up to address the bill to advise the House what his instructions from me were in relation to it. Deferred indefinitely. Madam Speaker, I know because of the representations I had then, that's 4 years ago, what the result of this would be to our people. Not just mine, they belong to all of us. We represent all of them. And certainly as Premier, I did represent them all. And as I've said to the powers that be, whenever I have to make a choice between what I believe is best for my people and what the bureaucrats want, I will always come down in favor of what I believe is the right thing by my people. Madam Speaker, I don't think I can add any more until we get to the committee stage, when I hope the member from West Bay West will move his amendment, and we can have another discussion to see if we can salvage something from what will otherwise be, in my view, a social disaster. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Deputy Governor.
Thank you. Yes, please. Madam Speaker, thank you. Madam Speaker, on November 7th, the government published a gambling amendment bill, which is intended to amend the current act, which, as the Premier said, has been in existence for almost 59 years. Also, longer than I've been alive as well. Minor amendments were made to the legislation in 2015, facilitating the registering of cruise ships with casinos on the local shipping registry, and also permitting local volunteer organizations, churches, and service clubs to hold lawful raffles. The bill before Parliament here today are proposed to amend current legislation in line with government efforts to foster safe communities in the Cayman Islands, maintain rule of law, and to disincentivize illegal gambling crimes in all of its forms by providing updated legislation and appropriate sanctions. Madam Speaker, in recent years, our community has seen a sharp increase in the rate of violent crimes linked to illegal gambling, including armed robberies, intimidation, and murder. The rising crime and hidden societal implications of gambling in general are enabled through the existing legislation, which is outdated and provides little to no deterrence for those involved in this type of criminal activity. The fine for offenses under Section 4 of the existing Act, including keeping a common gaming house, is $400 or 12 months, while an offense under Section 5 of the current Act, committing an act of illegal gambling, is $10 or 2 months. I think we all agree that $10 fine is not a deterrent. $10 or 2 months imprisonment. Current sanctions provide little or no deterrent effect to those engaged in this type of criminal enterprise. The adverse social impacts on illegal gambling in our community is also significant. Where there's an obvious link between illegal gambling and the various types of serious crime resulting from illegal gambling. While there are obvious links, less obvious are the costs to law enforcement and the wider society. The social cost of gambling at an individual and familial level are sometimes referred to as hidden costs due to the fact that they're often misunderstood or overlooked. It is therefore imperative that we enact legislation measures to deter illegal gambling and the long-term effects it has on the health and safety of our communities, our integrity as people, and the jurisdiction reputation for good governance and upholding the rule of law. The increased sanctions and fines for a range of gambling offenses contained in the new bill will act as a strong deterrent to disincentivize those persons that engage in illegal gambling across the Cayman Islands. The enhanced powers and sanctions provide provided will assist the police to tackle this problem and go after the proceeds of illegal gambling, confiscating assets obtained from the criminal proceeds of illegal gambling and betting. Madam Speaker, the Gambling Amendment Bill penalties are proposed to increase the range of gambling offenses, including the use and ownership of premises for gambling, the publication of lottery numbers, and dealing with money resulting from gambling. The fine for committing such offenses would increase from $400 to $10,000 in terms of imprisonment from 1 year to 4 years. The Premier has already set out what some of the other penalties are, so I will not duplicate that. The proposed amendments support government strategic broad outcomes, including, as I said earlier, creating safer communities, strengthening good governance for more effective government, and promoting the stronger enforcement of updated legislation, including changing the current culture surrounding crime through increased enforcement. Illegal gambling and crime in the Cayman Islands. Illegal gambling in the Cayman Islands is a criminal enterprise and is managed and controlled by organized crime syndicates who accumulate significant criminal assets, funding a criminal lifestyle, feeding an illicit underground black market economy in an uncontrolled environment, significantly and adversely impacting our most vulnerable persons in our society. The police intelligence picture indicates that there is a hierarchical structure does exist in relation to illegal gambling in the Cayman Islands, with individuals employed as salespersons, sellers, and senior salespersons on behalf of a small group of coordinators. In terms of organized crime group structure, it is believed that a number of syndicates or organized crime groups headed by a principal operate within the Cayman Islands. There are defined roles within the organized crime group, with the principal subject coordinating subordinates to sell numbers, collect bets, pay out winnings, and transfer monies. The senior members of the organized crime group utilize contacts with legitimate businesses to launder money generated from illegal gambling. Intelligence and arrests indicate that a number of persons are involved as salespersons facilitating illegal gambling in the Cayman Islands. The majority only earn a relatively small income from these activities based on how many numbers they sell. A significant portion of the street-level salespersons involved in illegal gambling in the Cayman Islands are not permanent residents and reside here on work permits under the guise of working for legitimate employers. A substantial number of local businesses and licensed premises, primarily in the District of Georgetown area, are utilized for the sale of numbers and exchange for cash. The locations where illegal gambling is taking place and the profile of the suspects involved at the street level indicates that these criminal activities run alongside legitimate small business enterprises, and the majority of those involved are supplementing income received from legal employment with additional funds generated from the sale numbers of foreign lotteries. It is evident that over recent years, criminal groups involved in serious violent crime target sellers and premises. Due to the revenue it generates, they are attractors for other serious crimes, where criminal groups will target those persons in possession of large amounts of cash obtained from illegal gambling. The offenses include armed robbery, aggravated burglary, some with firearms involved. A significant portion of these offenses targeted those employed in illegal gambling are never reported to law enforcement. Violent crimes targeting the sellers and the other open public locations puts the vendor and the wider community at risk. Although considerable intelligence gaps still exist in respect of law enforcement, insight into illegal gambling in the Cayman Islands. And Madam Speaker, these numbers are staggering. An estimate of between 30 million and 50 million in annual turnover, dependent on the number of active syndicates at any time, is a realistic and conservative figure for monies generated by illegal gambling. Madam Speaker, this is a serious, serious criminal enterprise that we see happening in our islands. Illegal gambling is a pervasive criminal activity in the Cayman Islands. There is no legal alternative in the Cayman Islands, and as a result, organized crime has taken advantage of this gap in the market, resulting in the establishment of a number of crime syndicates offering the opportunity for residents of the Cayman Islands to gamble primarily on foreign legal lotteries by placing bets on numbers. Illegal gambling poses a number of crime threats and security risks to the Cayman Islands. The organized crime groups involved to have international links and import individuals to engage in their criminal enterprise. Illegal gambling generates a substantial amount of illicit revenue for organized crime, which is subsequently laundered through illicit economy of the Cayman Islands. The largest illegal number of games in the Cayman Islands are the Jamaican Cash Pot and Red Ball Lottery, which are based in the legal Supreme Ventures game of the same name. It is played 7 days per week, 6 times a day. It pays $3,000 for a $100 ticket, or $10,000 if the ticket is a mega ball ticket purchased for an additional $100. In the Cayman Islands, this game is controlled by a number of independent sellers. The Honduran lottery operates at 1 p.m. every Sunday. Sources indicate that they do not believe that the game is controlled by a single individual. There are multiple independent sellers operating the game. The game is still widely played by numerous demographics within our community. BVI and Belize lotteries are still operated but not as well established as the Jamaican and Honduras lotteries. There are several main sellers and numerous independent sellers. These games are played 3 times a day, 6 days a week. Illegal sales are mainly operated from licensed retail premises in Georgetown. Jamaican horse race betting continues to be popular. It operates on some Mondays and Wednesdays, all Saturdays, and all public holidays. The activities take place all over Grand Cayman. Violent crime linked to illegal gambling. Since the start of 2018, analysis of violent crimes in the Cayman Islands has resulted in the identification of 21 offenses that are believed to be linked to illegal gambling. It is inferred that this total is well below the actual number of offenses that have taken place due to underreporting because of the legal status of gambling in the Cayman Islands. The prevalence of these offenses increased in the last 23 months, with 8 occurring in 2021 and a further 10 offenses in 2022. In terms of location, they were located at retail shop premises, 3 at licensed premises, 2 at barber shops, and 1 at a vacant lot. All were in Georgetown, in the Georgetown area. The 2 remaining offenses were at residential properties in Georgetown. And Madam Speaker, this is where it gets very serious. In 20 of the crimes, a weapon was used. While in the remaining crimes, the witnesses were reluctant to provide any details, and it is inferred that a weapon would likely have been present. Firearms were present in 17, handguns in 16, and what was believed to be a shotgun in the remaining crime. Handguns were discharged on 2 crimes that occurred in the 20th of July 2021 and the 14th of December 2021. On the 25th of April 2022, an attempted robbery turned fatal when a shot was discharged and a customer was fatally wounded. It is believed that robbery was linked to illegal gambling. 2 men since charged with murder are awaiting trial. On the 21st of June 2022, 2 shots were fired in the commission of a related crime on Shedden Road. Madam Speaker, I've heard the debate here today, and it talked about the government having to increase Northwood and Fairbanks because so many of our people are now going to be sent to prison. Mr. Speaker, that's not what we intend at all. We want our persons to stop taking part in an illegal numbers operation. Vegas, Madam Speaker, was not built on winners. I don't know of people who can make a living by gambling. I don't know how that is done. We want our persons to stop using the illegal gambling and put their money to better use. And Madam Speaker, it would seem to me that it's only a matter of time before we have another robbery or, God forbid, another death linked to illegal gambling. Madam Speaker, governments have an obligation to protect its citizens from violent crime. And that is exactly what this bill does. Madam Speaker, it may not be popular, but I really believe it's the right thing to do. The bill provides a real deterrent to those who purchase illegal lottery tickets and provides our law enforcement officers with the abilities to go after the assets of those who are the major players in the numbers game. And we've heard that we now have large crime syndicates that are involved in the illegal numbers game, Madam Speaker. This is not just 2 persons on the side of the road selling numbers. This is now organized crime. We have a duty to protect our persons from this type of criminal activity. Madam Speaker, we must take action now before another life is lost. In summary, illegal gambling in all its forms, in the absence of a robust legislative framework with appropriate sanctions, prevents a clear and present and unacceptable risk to the security and safety of the people of the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Attorney General. Before you speak, Attorney General, I'd just like to remind members of Standing Order 39, whilst I know the microphones are not on, it does get a little loud when members are speaking, just asking everybody to not speak as loud to disturb the members while they're speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me just confess that most of what I would have been saying have been quite eloquently stated or articulated by the Honorable Deputy Governor in this able presentation. And the thrust of what I wish to say is the objective of the proposed amendment is not to send anybody to Northwood. It's not to commit anybody to prison, Madam Speaker. Far from being the case. The issue here is that the state has an obligation to protect people, Madam Speaker, and in some instances, protect them from themselves. Fact of the matter is that because of the gambling activity that they are involved with, which then result in instances of persons having large stash of cash, they themselves become extremely vulnerable, and as we have heard, Madam Speaker, have been exposed to violence at times, robberies, and unfortunately, there was a related death, albeit it doesn't seem as if or sound as if it was a direct case of robbery. But these are the sort of activities that are connected, unfortunately, with robberies. And what the government is saying is that this is a means to an end. We need to find a way to prevent these sort of activities from happening. So the pull factor is really the cash, the amount of money that is involved, which is then causing persons to target the persons who are involved in these robberies, and oftentimes, Madam Speaker, causing harm to these people. You heard the Honorable Deputy Governor. The government has a responsibility to these people. It cannot be that the government is prepared to stand by and allow these people to be subjected to this level of violence, Madam Speaker. And so that is the thrust of what is being proposed here. And the purpose of the amendment, therefore, is that it will act as a deterrent for persons who are engaged in the numbers or the gambling activity. It will deter them from getting involved, and by extension, Madam Speaker, will prevent, certainly, them from being themselves targeted by persons who are prone to committing these heinous crimes. And, Madam Speaker, the truth is that the position has always been and will always be that persons have an option. Persons have an option not to purchase or otherwise get involved in these illegal activities. That is a way of preventing themselves from being subjected to the amendments to the Gambling Act. And Madam Speaker, we saw what happened. The government took the additional steps of seeking to engage the Cayman public on the issue by proposing a referendum to be preceded, of course, by a period of public national dialogue on the issue, Madam Speaker. This will help to inform the future direction of travel in respect of how to treat with gambling, Madam Speaker. And certainly this is an approach that needs to be commended, because the issue, as you heard from those who spoke before, is being kicked around for in excess of 40 years. And so, but no one seems willing to, as it were, bell the cat, Madam. And so people understand it's a very sensitive issue, and I don't think anyone would deny that. But the fact is that over the years, the country, the governments, various governments, have grappled with how to deal with this thing. Ever since I came here, I've heard discussions about whether or not there should be a national lottery and so on. But nothing has been done, Madam Speaker, because it is inherently a very difficult issue. And so Madam Speaker, the robberies, the injuries are really, if you ask me, collateral issues. But they are real issues that needs to be tackled by the government. There is a degree of immediacy about the whole thing. In recent times, there have been a number of robberies, not all associated with gambling, we must add. But the truth is that there are some that were involved with, because of gambling, was occasioned because of gambling. And, Madam Speaker, the way the government's obligation works is that if there's one person who is injured as a result of that, then there's one too many. And so the government has an obligation to take steps to prevent or at least mitigate the sort of exposure. And so this is what is being proposed in this bill, Madam Speaker, is not that the government is trying to pack up, as it were, Northwood or Fairbanks, or for that matter, trying to cause people to having to pay $20,000 in fines. But the government has a responsibility to do what is necessary to protect members of the public, Madam Speaker, who are associated with these gambling from being exposed to violence of some of the most heinous nature. That is the underlying objective. And I am not in the least, in any way, trying to minimize the history of the arguments that have been put forward. Sorry, the history about the involvements that have been put forward, Madam Speaker, over the years. It is something that has become ingrained in the society. And not because people are involved in are evil, but you heard that it is a means to an end. A number of persons and other people think it's a means to an end. The Honorable Deputy Governor quite rightly points out, not quite sure about how many people can make their living that way, but be that as it may, that is how some people view it, and they are attracted to the initiative, and so it is going to take some effort to wean them from it. But, Madam Speaker, in the meanwhile, the government also has to make effort to ensure that these persons are protected. And the way to do that is to put in place some sort of a deterrent to ensure that whenever persons think about getting involved in these things, they not only think about the potential harm to themselves, but they also think about the possibility of the serious penalties that is associated with them doing so. That is the crux of what the government is trying to do. Far from it, but trying to imprison anyone. The hope is that once the penalty has been increased, then no one will do that. Madam Speaker, it is in the same breath, it's in the same vein, for that matter, that the government amend the law to deal with the alcohol level when you drive. It's not because the government wants to send anybody to prison. It's not because the government wants to fine anybody. It's a means to an end. The government is trying to prevent or mitigate the carnage on the road. And so one way of doing so is to deal with the alcohol blood level and hope, Madam Speaker, that by having done so, persons will be discouraged from consuming alcohol and driving. That's the same sort of thinking that goes into what is being proposed here, Madam Speaker. Legislation hasn't been amended for over decades. And these $10 fines and penalties rather, and in some instances I think there are some $2 penalties. Madam Speaker. Yeah, $10, and there's a $2 daily penalty, running penalty. It's really not in keeping with reality. Yeah, certainly not in keeping with reality. And the truth is that as long as it remains an offense on the books, Madam Speaker, as long as it remains an offense or offenses on the books, then certainly there's an obligation on the part of the state to enforce it. If at some stage a government or a different governments take the view that it is no longer acceptable to treat with it as an offense, well, sufficient under the day. But for now, it is still an offense, it's a criminal offense, and as such, there's an obligation on the part of those who are involved in the enforcement to deal with it. So all the police is trying to do. They have been pleading with government, they have been pleading with us, pleading with just about everybody to say, listen, this thing is has become a real problem for us, in the sense that they are being called out to deal with these serious robberies, these shootings, because of the persons who are involved in this numbers game. And so the police have been urging, begging, pleading, could you make it less attractive for persons to get involved in these kind of activity, and hopefully serve as a deterrent once the penalties have been increased. So, Madam Speaker, as I said, most of what I would have been citing in support have been already ably presented by the Honourable Deputy Governor and the Honourable Premier. But it is important that I lend my voice to the initiative to point out that it is not about sending persons to prison, and that's why there's an alternative. But the hope is that with the increase in penalty, it will act as a deterrent and to, in a way, save persons from themselves, from the potential exposure of any harm to themselves by getting involved in the numbers game, Madam Speaker. I thank you very much.
Members, I know it's getting late. Some of you haven't yet eaten for the evening. I'll call on the Premier if he wants to move an adjournment.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. The hour is getting late, and I think it is close to what we had originally fairly indicated to members that we would be seeking to work to. I thank all members for their contributions, and I move the adjournment of this Honourable House until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Question is that the House do now adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. This Honourable House now stands adjourned.